Do you know what a sage is, Richmond? It's what I am. And it means that today isn't the day the gods returned. They were already here. They were merely parasitical, not resplendent. You see, Richmond, being a sage means Aida, Isu's scientist, husband of Juno herself, hid his memories in your DNA, and that it bubbled to the surface. Aida does not care about you, and the surfacing of his memories drives most sages mad. Violet told me this, pretty gleefully. But what, Richmond? And bear with me here as we run the hypothetical. What if your brain was already somehow different? What if you'd already learned to ignore and control voices, visions in your head? Well then, maybe you could push him down, just enough to access things that he knows. And taking apart a lock like this would be like taking apart Duplo for him. What then, Richmond? Elijah, 2017. Hello, I'm Andrew, and I want to welcome you to Visions of the Past, a podcast all about the lore of Assassin's Creed. This is episode 77, and today we're going to talk about the sage known as Elijah. First alluded to in a database entry in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Elijah has only appeared in the comic Assassin's Creed Uprising, and has a few paragraphs dedicated to him in the second edition of the Assassin's Creed Essential Guide. Born sometime around 2005, Elijah was found in October 2015 when his mother took him to an Abstergo clinic in New York. Unknown to both Elijah and his mother, this allowed for the Templars running the clinic to collect his DNA, which revealed him to be a sage with the exact same paralineal line as Desmond Miles. This revelation led Alvaro Grammatica to want to kidnap the boy and, in his own words, strip him for parts. Isabel Ardant, on the other hand, wanted to put him in an animus for the next 50 years to learn from his genetic memories. And because Elijah was considered an asset under Ardant, she chose to wait until the time was right, but also to keep an eye on him. Later in that year, Elijah was kidnapped by a member of the Instruments of the First Will, who went by the name of Richmond. Breaking into the home, Richmond killed Elijah's mother before abducting him from his bedroom. Sometime before February 2017, Elijah was told of his true nature and the potential that he had, with Richmond assigned to take care of Elijah, though none of them knew that he had overheard the murder of his mother. In February of 2017, Elijah was taken with a group of the Instruments, who ambushed a cell of assassins in Hong Kong who were looking for information on Abstergo's Phoenix project. During the ambush, Elijah sat on a desk while eating an apple, but spoke to the assassin Charlotte de la Cruz like they had known each other. The following month, Elijah was then at a gathering of the Instruments that was called after Juno had found that the Koh-i-Noor was in Spain. When presented to the crowd, Violet da Costa expressed a thought to Juno, that Elijah was his father's son, and that he should be in a cage, as Desmond was, in her eyes, prone to betrayal. Juno dismissed this, stating that he was happy to be a cog in her machinations. When Violet was given the location of Grammatica's secret lab, where he was working on the Phoenix project, by Otto Berg, the Instruments went there with Elijah and another prisoner, Andre Bolden. Their goal? To use Grammatica's work on the Phoenix project to create a cloned body for Juno. To create this clone, Grammatica took stem cells from Elijah's bone marrow while he was still conscious. Less than a day after this procedure, Elijah broke free from his restraints and killed Richmond, telling him how he heard Richmond kill his mother, and that since that moment, he had been waiting for the moment that they would all die. As Elijah snuck into Grammatica's lab where the cloned body of Juno was getting ready to kill Charlotte de la Cruz, after the latter had infiltrated the lab during an attack from her assassin cell, along with Otto Berg. Using the Koh-i-Noor, Elijah saved Charlotte and explained that the memories of Aida that was inside him recognized what was in her, and that the Koh-i-Noor linked them together. Using the artifact together, Charlotte and Elijah was able to guide the rest of the assassins to where they were in the building, and then used it to distract Juno from attacking everyone by forcing her to see the long-dead Isu Consus. Lashing out with her new powers, Juno tried to kill Consus, but instead caused the building to start to collapse, accidentally killing Grammatica with falling debris. Ordering Elijah to give her the artifact, Juno was unaware that Charlotte was coming up from behind, which ended with the death of Juno when Charlotte thrusted her hidden blade through the back of her neck. Just before her death, Elijah told Juno to die, and when she called for her husband, Elijah swore to her that he is a ghost in the wind, and that her line ended with the death of her cloned body. After the death of Juno, Elijah escaped alone with the Kui Noir, as Otto Berg set off a bomb that destroyed Juno's body, the Phoenix Project, and presumably killed Charlotte de la Cruz in the process. Believe it or not, that's all that we know about the sage known as Elijah. Interesting thing about Elijah is that I used to be like Alvaro Grammatica and refer to him as Elijah Miles, because the DNA tests that we are aware of point to him as Desmond's son. But recently, I stopped doing that, and the reason is quite simple. He's not really a Miles. He was raised by a single mother and never knew his father, meaning that most likely he would have had his mother's surname. Something else interesting that I found while researching this podcast was what it meant for Elijah to have the same patrilineal line as Desmond. Patrilineal line is essentially the trace of your fathers that you have, all the way back to the beginning of time, or your father's fathers, fathers' fathers, fathers' fathers, etc., etc. The same goes for your matrilineal line, but instead of fathers, it would be mothers. This differs from the word paternal, as paternal means everyone on your father's side instead of the straight line of fathers. So when it is said that Desmond and Elijah share the same patrilineal line, it means that they share the same men along the father's line. Without going too much into DNA genealogy, what this means is that the locations that we are told about, 19th century American Midwest, 18th century American Revolution, 16th century Ottoman Empire, and the 15th century Italian Renaissance, are not the ancestors that we know about in these locations, because we know that Desmond is descended from Ezio's daughter Flavia and Ratagehetan's daughter Ianhote, putting them on the paternal side of the family, but not along the patrilineal line. I know that a lot of people will immediately think that they know the people based on the location, and that's what you're meant to think. It's just, it isn't how science works at this point, which, as my wife pointed out when I told her, covers less than half of your ancestry. It actually covers much less than half of your ancestry. With the genealogy science aside, I think Elijah is an interesting character. He's a sage with the added benefit of Desmond's genealogy, which allowed him to keep his own mind instead of succumbing to Aida's memories, like most of the sages that we know about. He also was seen last with the Kui Noir, which sometimes is viewed as the most powerful piece of Eden, and one that is capable of locating other pieces of Eden. This can allow for a story to go in so many different directions. And it's in that thought as why I wanted to talk about him today. Over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about how the first Assassin's Creed could be remade as an RPG, as so many fans have come to the series with the new style, but have yet to play the story of Altair because of how the story was told. I've been thinking that the best way to do this, and Ubisoft, you can have this idea for free, but it isn't remastering the game or upgrading what we have, but to retell Altair's story through Elijah, and instead of having him use an Animus 1.28 like Desmond did, have him use something like the Mobile Animus HR 8.5 or something newer. But if we did that, the first question that would need to be answered is, why is Elijah in an Animus? Well, there could be multiple reasons for that. He could have been caught by Abstergo, or the instruments of the First Will, or maybe even his grandfather William. But to me, the fact that he also has the Kui Noir might make him irrelevant if that was the route. I think it best that if you start the game much like the original did, as any marketing should focus solely on Altair and his life, and after failing to sync the memory that he wants, we should find out that Elijah is now either leading the instruments of the First Will, which I think is unlikely based on what happened with Juno, or that he's leading a new group of people that follow him, or maybe they're enamored with the Kui Noir. But eventually we should find out that he's searching for something in the Animus that is meant to boost the power of the Kui Noir, so that he can find the surviving pieces of Eden. As for how they found the Animus, that can be explained in an email or some computer file about it being stolen from Abstergo after finding out that somewhere in Elijah's lineage is this new piece of Eden. As for the Third Crusades itself, the idea of moving to the Animus that we have seen in Origins and Odyssey, or a newer one, well, this allows for the in-universe explanation on why things can be slightly different in this game than in the original. It explains why things are bigger and connected in an RPG setting. It allows for Altair to swim and climb faster than he did in the original, but it also allows for more story to be told. For instance, the 60 Templars scattered throughout the original game can now be part of a screen much like the Order of the Ancients screen that track their members in Valhalla, and it can give them a story, which should all be content and not directly tied into Altair's hunt for the Nine. And the flags can now transition into new collectibles, telling a story of how in the original they weren't flags, but something that the Animus 1.28 couldn't read in the DNA. There are a few lingering questions, though. First, what to do about the main story, as it is somewhat short, especially when you compare it to what we've seen in the RPG era of Assassin's Creed. I like the idea of bringing back the DNA tracker and use it like the original did. Complete a few missions and then go to your target, or complete more to get more synchronization. I also propose expanding Altair's life, going back to the death of his father in 1176 and starting with his training, possibly montage it like Ezio's training did in AC2. And tell the story on how he evolved into the person that we saw in the original game. You can also take Altair's story past the hunt for the Nine to the conception of Seth in 1197. This expansion also allows for the retelling of the games Assassin's Creed Altair's Chronicles and Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, as they take place in 1190 and 1191 respectively, and to add new parts of the story like Altair finding a new piece of Eden that Elijah is looking for. I'd originally thought about showing some of Seth's life or the life of Seth's daughters, but as it was pointed out to me by one of my close friends, that could lead to the player not connecting to who they were playing as, and you would essentially be asking them to build more than one character, and that is better to do in a full linear game. Side missions, I think, are also fairly straightforward to port over. Citizen saving missions, along with new ones that can be created, but confirmed by the DNA tracker, to have been done in years other than 1191, being the best way, in my opinion, to go about and not needing to retcon the original game. I'm sure you're asking yourself one big question right now. If we start Altair's life in 1176, he'd be 11 years old. And right now, if we used Elijah, he'd be 16. Isn't that a little young to be training to be a murderer or working in an Animus? For the most part, I agree with you. I wouldn't want to be playing as Elijah for another handful of years, when he's in his late teens or early 20s, and lucky for us, unless there's a game in active development with him as a character, it would take that long to even create the game, pushing him into that age bracket. As for Altair, there's already a bit of precedence in the series to show characters at that age within the Animus. Take Assassin's Creed 3, for example. We play as Ratageheton at the age of 4 when his village is burned and his mother died. And then we watch him leave to find Achilles at the age of 13. And with time skips only showing some of his training, he is fully inducted into the Brotherhood of Assassins at the age of 17. Showing Altair at this age also allows for showing of how Masyaf is run under Al-Mualim, and just how young people in the late 12th century were when they were forced to fend for themselves. You might also be thinking right now, sure, the story's the easy part. What about things that are all common in RPGs? Things like a large map, multiple weapon styles, armor, and dialogue choices. Well, all of that can tie back into the Animus and the return of the DNA tracker. The map is the easy one. Based on what we know of Altair's life during this time, he went as far north as Aleppo. The map is the easy one. Based on what we know of Altair's life, he went as far north as Aleppo, Syria, and as far south as Jerusalem, Israel. And the distance between those two cities is just about 20 miles farther than the Isle of Wight and Hadrian's Wall in England, giving the map the room to be just as large as Assassin's Creed Valhalla's England. We also know that he spent time in Cyprus before Seth was born, giving the ability to show another map that easily could be the size of one of the mythical worlds in Valhalla. What about weapons and armor, since we know Altair preferred to use a sword, a short sword, and throwing knives as weapons, and he always wore his assassin robes? This is where the animus and the DNA tracker comes in, and the same explanation can explain dialogue choices. I assume that during training, Altair would have trained with multiple styles of weapons, eventually leading him to prefer the swords and throwing knives. If you introduce the new styles of weapons, you can use the animus as an explanation on why we can use weapons that he didn't use while on missions. Same goes with armor. We have seen more and more weapon and armor sets introduced that can only be explained as animus hacks anyway. I'm looking at you, exotic Helix Door sets. But this, of course, can lead to many more asking, well, what really happened? That's where the DNA tracker comes in. It can be used to track not only what missions you've done, but how you've done them, giving more synchronization to how Altair would have done them. For instance, if a target was killed with a hidden blade and you used a spear in the middle of the market, you should have less sync. Same goes as if you were wearing some exotic armor. But the biggest thing that should affect synchronization is the dialogue, because that is how you can truly judge his story. Without telling users what Altair actually said, you should give the user choices, and then depending on how close they were to what Altair actually said, you'd get more sync. This would allow for multiple playthroughs and to show how the simulation can change within the animus. All it really takes to explain how the animus can do this is one line of dialogue, one email that explains how the simulation within the animus can be manipulated and it can fit into the existing lore. All of this doesn't even go into how you can tie Elijah as a sage into the narrative. Though for me, I would wait until you have an Elijah sequel to do that. Explain that the memories coming out are because of the bleeding effect, that it's making it harder and harder for Elijah to keep them buried. I think with enough time and dedication to the explanation that what we see in the animus is a simulation of history that can be manipulated, almost anything is possible. But what do you think about Elijah and the idea of using him to retell Altair's story? Let me know over on Twitter at visions_AC. And if you're interested in hearing about my thoughts on an Elijah sequel, let me know that too. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for new episodes. If you love stories about Assassin's Creed lore, please follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform, and tell your friends about this podcast. If you have any questions about Assassin's Creed or topics that you'd like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at visions_AC, and you can find those links in the show notes below. Until next time, my assassin friends, make sure to follow the Creed, and to those Templars listening, may the Father of Understanding guide you.